Mark Moss, our annual LA get together.
I love it.
Yeah, man.
I love hanging out with you, Peter.
Well, I do as well, because we don't agree on a lot apart from Bitcoin, but I think we always have a good, respectful conversation, and I certainly leave thinking about the things you say to me. I don't know if it works both ways, but
I think it's important. I think, from a freedom of speech standpoint, like freedom of speech is so important because I believe the truth will win in open, honest dialogue. And we can talk honestly, right? Like I was telling Danny the other day, I was in Austin this last week, and I started talking to this guy, and he had these very divergent views. And he threw out like the nuclear bomb kind of thing. He's like, so we should all just drive on the wrong side of the road then? And like, that's not that's something that you throw out to like in the conversation. That's not like an honest question. Like, of course, nobody thinks we should drive on the wrong side of the road, but I feel like we engage pretty good. So it's always fun.
Well, I think we've done seatbelts, so we don't need to do that.
Right.
How you been, man? You been good?
Yeah, man, we've been good. It's been a busy year. Building in the bear market. It's fun.
Well, if you can ignore the financial challenges of a bear market, which, they exist. Yeah. I actually prefer a bear market. I don't know about you. I learn more. I think we create better content in a bear market because you have to work harder.
You have to work harder.
You have to work harder, so you think about it a lot more.
Well, you ignore the surface level. Let's talk about NGU, right? Let's talk about the price going up, so you ignore that. I've been standing up a Bitcoin Opportunity Fund with James Lavish and Corey and Greg Foss, et cetera. It's been a little challenging trying to raise a bunch of money in this market. So from that perspective, but I think it's at the perfect time. So we've been here before, right, Peter?
We've been here before, man. It's not my first bear market.
Yeah.
Okay, so we made a show actually 2 years ago in Miami where we talked about cycles.
Yep.
And I think it might be, can you just do the quick reminder on that? Because I feel like we're even more at that point that you were talking about, these cycles all kind of hitting at the same time. Yep. I think that's a good start for the framing of getting towards the ideas of CBDCs and the challenges of those. So do the TLDR on that one.
Yeah, and so there's 3 cycles. We talk about political cycles, revolution cycles, financial revolution cycles, and technological revolution cycles. And I think for me, and maybe it's just the way that I view the world, obviously we look at it differently, but I think it's super important because I listen to people that I really respect, like Luke Grumman. He can get into the weeds of the financial system and the energy markets, or Lynn Alden, and these guys are legends for sure. I spend about 50% of my time just in the macro space. So like I have a grasp. I'm certainly not at that level. But what I think is that you can't understand really the bigger picture unless you look at the political and the technological side of things. Ray Dalio, amazing. He spends hundreds of millions of dollars on research. His book is chock full of data. And I agree with a lot of it, but he never talks about the technology piece. And when you look through thousands of years of history, you see it's always technology that changes the world. And so how could you leave that out? And so again, if we're just going to sit here and talk, Luke Grumman, and we're talking about the bonds and the dollar and the energy markets, but not talk about the technology and the political socioeconomic changes, I think it's hard to really get the context of the world. So to frame it up, I like to look at all 3. And the way that I see it is we have financial revolution cycles about every 80 years. This is what Ray Dalio kind of talks about. About every 80 years, you have these financial revolutions that happen. So about 80 years ago was the Bretton Woods Agreement, right? And we can kind of keep going back. And this is where, Dalio would talk about like long-term credit cycles, et cetera. And then about every 50 years, we have technological revolutions that happen. There's really been 5 since the late 1700s, and that's where we'll start. But before we dig into that, about every 80 years, as kind of referenced in the Fourth Turning, really it's a range. About every 84 years, we have what's called a regime change cycle, political uprise and regime change. So about every 84 years, we see that. And if you look at like technical analysis, which is sort of like reading the tea leaves, but you'll see whenever things make like a triple bottom or it touches support 3 times, it has a big move. So 84 times 3 is 252. So every 250 years, we have this big political revolution cycle. So 250 years ago was the American French Revolution. 250 years before that was the Protestant Reformation. And so we have these 3 cycles, political, financial, and technological. They happen on different time frames, but periodically they converge. And right now we're witnessing all 3 converging right now, which is why this is such a powerful move that we're in.
Okay. And can you just explain what the what the different kind of examples of these are.
Yeah.
So what is actually happening? So what is the political cycle, the 250-year cycle?
Yeah.
What's the kind of point we're hitting?
So I think there's two really good books that I think were kind of instrumental for me. So one, I think The Fourth Turning is a good idea. And really the underlying theory in that book is generational theory. So this means that, from each generation, we pass down a series of things. And for an example, this is, it would be over 4 generations, so 20-year cycles. So here's a real world example. My grandfather is a farmer in Iowa, okay? The hardest worker you've ever imagined. I mean, in the early 1900s, being a farmer in middle America was hard work. My father, the oldest of 5 kids and quite a bit older, had to do the majority of the work. And as he grew up, my grandfather would loan him out to other farms to help them with their harvest, right? They kind of work together. So my father's like an insane hard worker, like beyond I could even imagine. But he left the farm. He didn't want to continue being a farmer. So he moved and he's a construction worker. And my father, I look at him as the hardest worker I've ever known, even to the point when, he was 10 years from retirement. I'm like, don't you want to take a vacation? And he's like, no. I'm like, what? But as hard as a worker he wasn't as hard a worker as my grandfather. My dad left the farm. Now, my dad made me go work construction with him when I was a kid, and it gave me the work ethic I have today. But as a kid, I got dirty doing that, and I swore to myself I would never do a job I had to get dirty. So I'm a hard worker. Most people look at me and go, how the heck do you get so much done? But nowhere near my dad, okay? And now my kids, they don't know what work is. That's 4 generations.
What do you think's driving that? Technology?
Well, no, it's
opportunity.
So that's generational theory, right?
But is that opportunity?
Well, there's a lot to unpack within that.
Yeah.
But certainly, then we have to look at the technology side and the economic side. So on the technology side, I spend a lot of time in very remote places of the world because I'm a surfer and a dirt bike racer. And so, like going through Mexico, you'll see that there's all these little villages and stuff that have been there forever, and they're all basically ghost towns now because all the kids want to move to the city where the technology is.
Yep.
So there's certainly that piece. There's that draw. But really, I think what it is the generational theory, and it's that human nature. We tend to take things too far, and then we're like, oh, shoot, what have we done? So we correct, and we take them too far again. And we go, oh, shoot, what have we done? We take them back. So there's another book written called The Pendulum. And the pendulum basically talks about how the pendulum swings back and forth, how we go from one extreme to the next extreme. And they document thousands of years of history in this, and it's an 80-year cycle as well.
This is the whole peak centralization.
Sure. Yeah. So they talk about on an 80-year cycle, which is same as the Fourth Turning, but for different reasons, right? The Fourth Turning is 4 generations of like degradation before things get bad enough that we have to change. And they talk about it where it's like a pendulum swinging back from centralization to decentralization. And again, we take things too far and we have to go back. So both of those books were really good, I think, from that level.
And so you think we're hitting this kind of point of monetary, technological, and political change all at the same time?
Yeah. So just to stick on the political side for a second. So about every 84 years we have this political uprising regime change. So about 84 years ago into World War II. So that was obviously a big shift. Hitler, Mussolini, and even in the U.S. we had FDR's New Deal, which kind of changed the U.S. sort of from like a capitalist society, more of a socialist society. About 84 years before that, we had Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, which I've countered with the Uncommunist Manifesto. Shameless plug for that book. Check it out on Amazon. But that was that led to the largest uprising in European history. And about 84 years before that was then the French and the American Revolution. So that's 3 cycles, right? 250 years.
What's this? Sorry, can you unpack this FDR thing for me? Because I don't know about this move from capitalist to socialist.
Yeah. So I mean, everything's a spectrum, obviously,
of course, yeah.
But like we went from the founding of America, and obviously that would be very capitalist, right? And the government continues to get bigger, bigger, bigger. Well, going into FDR's New Deal that's when all like the 3-4 letter agencies in the U.S. Got started up, right? So this was like, hey, let's put in the SEC and let's put in the FDA and let's move a huge amount of money from the private sector to the public sector. Let's grow the government. Let's give all these social programs, the welfare systems, the food system, all that was created under FDR. It's what's called the New Deal. They're now talking about like the New Deal, right? The New Deal.
The New Deal.
But I think that's really when the world shifted. We saw the size of the government just blow up.
Yep.
All these social programs get started. And really it was sort of the birth of this administrative state. You probably have come across that term. Some people call it the deep state. But it's really this administrative state that we have. So we have all these like regulatory bodies that are non-government elected officials that have most of the power in the country, and they're like the SEC. I'm sure you've talked plenty about Gary Gensler.
Well, Gary Gensler is one guy making an important decision, which he's holding back millions of Americans from being able to buy a BlackRock ETF of Bitcoin. Whatever you think of it, Bitcoin ETFs, it doesn't matter. He's stopping it,
right? And
it's very clear his incentives are that he's a puppet for Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
Elizabeth Warren is anti-crypto. She wants to maintain the dollar as the power. By the way, I'm kind of repeating something somebody said to me the other day, but I've been aware of this. But these are single people who hold power over hundreds of millions of people.
Right. So and they're making laws effectively through regulation
based on their career objectives.
Right. And this is the opposite of what the United States is supposed to be, because we're supposed to be a representative government where we elect people to go represent our best interests to pass laws. And then laws, they start as a bill and they go through discussion, they go through votes, but they're creating all this with none of that.
Yeah.
And so they're just pushing their own agendas and literally creating laws through regulation.
Just out of interest, when America was founded by the forefathers, how was government paid for then? Was there any taxation?
There was taxation. It was mostly through like excise tax, right?
Okay.
The income tax didn't start until the Federal Reserve was created in 1913.
Right, because I remember Jameson Lott years ago posted, and it was like a 2% tax, wasn't it?
Yeah, so, and it was based off of consumption, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when people say, but what about my roads? Well, it's like the roads were there before the government collected a tax, right? And so at the end of the day, all the government can do is just appropriate things, right? So the government can't create something they haven't taken. They can't give something they haven't taken. Mm-hmm. And so they take my money, and then who builds the roads here? Well, they just hired private companies to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And now here in California and Texas and all over the world is toll roads. So those are private roads. So seems like we have a way to do that without that. But so that's sort of the framework of that, right? Kind of going off a deep end on this administrative state. Something Vivek Ramaswamy has kind of put in his crosshairs. He's sort of like running his campaign on getting rid of that administrative state, this bureaucratic state. So anyway, that's this FDR New Deal really kind of blew that up. And so that really shifted the way of the world. So I think that kind of fits into this sort of regime change, if you will.
So when you talk about regime change, what is the scope of possibilities that we're going to see coming? Because you have an election in a year-ish, and it's still going to be a Republican versus a conservative with perhaps an independent and RFK, but it's still, the status quo is still the same.
Yeah, I think that's changing a lot, in my opinion, and maybe I'm a little bit hopeful, but I think that people are waking up to realize that it's not left or right or it's a uniparty, and it's we the people versus the government. I think that's pretty apparent at this point. I've never voted Democrat in my life, and I like a lot of things RFK says.
Well, apparently he's going to run independent. That's what I've heard.
He said I think that's the case now. When you and I were both out in Memphis and we were at his little party, some of the guys that run his campaign told me that he would, if he couldn't get the DNC, then he would move to independent. And now that appears to be the case.
You just made us sound really cool then.
By saying we were at that event?
His little party.
Well, it was, right? We were at Elvis Presley's Motor Museum with all the old cars and RFK's dinner, right?
Did I tell you that I was in Memphis?
Yeah, I was there. Well, I wasn't in Memphis. I was in Nashville with you, though.
I came on a tiny little plane and shit myself.
Yeah, we're just name dropping here. We're acting cool, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I've never voted Democrat in my life, and I think he is the poster child for the Democratic Party. Obviously, not what it's become today, but a liberal party, right? A freedom party, and
just so I can establish a position this and understand, are you ultimately a no government person who is a realist who will vote and try and influence in the apparatus that exists, or are you a small government person?
I believe that I'm for the party that would give us more freedom, and that'd be a smaller government.
Yeah,
certainly.
Okay.
But
you don't believe either of them are that right now. It is a uniparty now.
Sure, it's certainly a uniparty. I think there's the fringes, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, but I think the majority is just a giant uniparty. And I mean, look at Mitch McConnell, and I mean, they're just as bad as any big. He's going around saying the single most important issue to Americans is the war in Ukraine. really? Because that's not even anybody's top 25.
Yeah. Well, so there are like seeds of change happening. So a lot on this trip, we've recorded these shows in batches. So a lot on this trip we've talked about, because like since my last trip, I went to Lebanon and Argentina. And in Argentina, you have Javier Milei, who's a libertarian. He won the primaries. He's leading. So I kind of think what you'll end up seeing is it's almost like the dollar will be the last sovereign currency standing. It might be the last traditional government standing, in that I think these smaller countries, which are collapsing first, are seeing these new kind of. I mean, there's even libertarian things about Bukele. He's clearly not a libertarian, but he has some libertarian ideas.
Well, so there's no black or white. The world isn't black or white. And I think the problem that most people have is their mental model is seeing the world in black and white. And the world is full of nuance. And so that's why it's so hard to align with one political ideology or party, where it's like, well, there's little bits here, little bits there, right? And so and this is all part of the plan. I mean, if you're a fan of like Dr. James Lindsay, he talks about this a lot. But like part of this Marxist, it's the Marxist language, is to blur the lines of nuance. So in Hitler's book Mein Kampf, he talks about how he couldn't get the German people to see his ideas and unite them. So he went back to learn the language of the Marxists. And when he used the language of the Marxists, he was able to unite the movement and bring them forward. Great. So then what does that mean? What's the language of the Marxist? Well, let's go back and figure that out. So they use something called the dialectic. And the dialectic is a certain way they use language. They pervert language, if you will, to blur that. So for example, they would say, a red and green apple are basically the same thing, right? They're both apples. That's true. They are basically the same thing. They're both apples, but they're different. Then they would say, well, oranges and apples are basically the same thing, right? They're both fruit.
We talked about this before.
I don't think we talked about it before.
Yeah, no, you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this is like a way to blur these lines, and we start to go, well, they're sort of the same thing. Yeah, but the difference is important. I think before we go deep down that rabbit hole, I'd like to go back and just establish the technology piece real quick, because I think this is the underlying driver of everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when we spoke about this previously, something has changed significantly since then, and I'm going to bring it up, but you do the technology piece.
Yeah, so if we look through thousands of years of history, we see it's technology. And the reason why it's technology is because technology changes the way that we communicate and the way that we work, but more importantly, the way that we organize, okay? And so what happens is that, 1,000 years ago, we had the stirrup. We've talked about this before, right? Now, you can go back on Wikipedia and you can look at the stirrup. It had been used in the Hun industry in China, whatever, but it really didn't get into Europe until about 1000 AD. Now, I was just recently in Europe this summer. I spent about a month there, and we were in Rome at the
Colosseum?
No. Where's the Pope? Vatican. The Vatican.
Yeah.
Right. And they have all these museums of art, right? And so we're looking at some of the oldest art in the world, right? And you can see they're riding horses without stirrups, like it's drawn in there, right? So like you had in biblical times, you had the Egyptians, armies, and they would use horses with chariots, and the Romans would ride horses, but they'd get off the horse and fight, right? So when the stirrup came into Europe, it changed things. So this piece of technology allowed a knight to get on a horse, and they could fight from a horse. Now what that did is it changed the way we organize, because now one knight could control hundreds of serfs, and that created a new political system, the feudal system. So that allowed us to get this centralized form of government where you had the king, right, the knights, and they controlled the serfs. 500 years later, 1500 years later, in the 1500s, they got the gunpowder revolution, and now that allowed a serf to take out 100 knights, and then that decentralized it, brought it into the feudal system. We went back to sort of like this cottage and farm industry. So because it changed the way that we could organize, it changed the way that government's structure would run. Then we created the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s. So now you had to leave the farms and the cottage and go into the cities and into the factories. And what's important to understand about this is that everyone had to move into the cities and the factories, and it wasn't enough just to be like in the United States. You had to be in Chicago or New York. And because of that, we got this mass manufacturing. So we had 5 technological revolutions, the Industrial Revolution being the first one. That's when we started using machines for the first time. Then we had steam engines and railways. Then we had electricity, steel, heavy equipment. 1908, we got the automobile, oil fuels, and mass production. So Henry Ford was known as the father of the automobile, but cars had been invented before him. What he really invented was mass production. And the reason why that's important is for a couple key points that I like to bring out is one, this mass production required us to come up with a new type of management structure. So we've never had mass production, so how do we manage mass production? So like McDonald's, I put the cup in, I hit the medium, everything has to be run like a cog in a wheel, where I could pull one person out and I could snap the next person in. In this mass production, you and I work on the assembly line, and you may be way smarter than me, but I just put my part on, you put your part in. And so it equalized everybody, which helped create a massive middle class. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason why we've lost the middle class isn't because all our jobs have gone to China. Certainly that's happened. But more importantly, we've moved into the information age, where now if I'm smarter, I can excel. And so it's really created that gap. But going back to this for a second, so we have this mass manufacturing. We had to create a management structure to manage the masses like cogs in a wheel. Now, when that happened, we created an economic structure to do the same. So when you look at John Maynard Keynes, kind of the father of this modern monetary system that we have, the Keynesian economics, if you look at economics, as you have many times, you see that they're trying to manage people like a spreadsheet, like a cog in a wheel. But Mises wrote the book Human Action. Humans act irrationally. We're not a spreadsheet. We're not a cog in a wheel. So we work in our own human action, and some days I just want something different, right? So they created this mass manufacturing technology. We created a management structure to manage the masses like cogs in a wheel. That created an economic system to manage the economy like that, and it created a government system to manage the mass management system to manage the mass production system. Okay, so the form of government that we have today and the economic system we have today is built and designed for the industrial era. But we're in a different world today. See, technology has changed it, and this is part of this big uprising that we're seeing. So now we no longer have mass manufacturing and mass management. Now today we have small businesses. Now we have digital nomads. Your career that you're doing right here, my career, those weren't available back then, right? And now we have digital nomads. They're moving to Mexico City. They're moving to Tulum, whatever they're doing. We have small internet businesses. And so now there's other ways. We'll get to that. And this is more like the communication side, but this is just the organization side. So I said change the way we communicate, but change the way we organize. So this has changed the organization structure of the world. And now people are spreading all over the world. We have small companies now. And the current form of government we have is no longer compatible with the world that we're going into.
Okay, why is the current form of government not compatible?
Because it was designed to it was a form of government that was designed to manage the mass corporations, which were designed to manage the masses as cogs in a wheel in a business.
Surely there's more nuance to it to that.
Sure,
there's lots of different reasons.
There's a lot. So we have to keep going, right?
Yeah.
So remember, I said technology changes 3 ways.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just one of the ways. The other ways that it changes is there's a great book written. I had the author on my show, Martin Gurry. It's a book called Revolt of the Public. Have you heard of that book?
No, but I'm writing it down.
Yeah, and so going back to technology, and so if you look at the Protestant Reformation, which was against kind of the church and the state, right? And what happened is a new piece of technology was created 70 years earlier called the printing press, right? And what that did is it democratized access to information, and that then all of a sudden they said, hey, what you're telling us isn't accurate, and we no longer trust you anymore. So you've been this authority figure, but now we don't trust you. You've lied to us. And trust is super fragile. It's a very key piece we'll get to later. We'll get to CBDCs. But trust is very fragile. When you find your business partner embezzled from you, you never do business with that guy again.
Yeah.
Right? Your wife cheated on you, whatever it may be, right? And so when they lied, now the church tried to stamp that out as fast as they can. They called that heresy and they killed them all, but it didn't matter, right? Well, in this book, the Revolt of the Public, he was a CIA analyst and the author. And he talks about how the internet has basically done the exact same thing, which we've talked about at Mass. But he said, we had the dot-com boom to 2000, then we had the dot-com crash. So in 2001, more information was created that year than all of humanity before. And then the next year more, the next year more, the next year more. But what's important is, I had a show with Breedlove. I talked about the crisis and the confidence of authority. So what's happened is we've assigned a lot of our thinking process to experts, like a technocracy, and these authority figures. If you're on the nightly news desk, as seen on TV, we think there's authority there. You have a Dr. Schmuck, there's authority. You're a university professor, you have authority. But now, because of the access to information from the internet, that's all quickly disproven all the time. Oh, it's peaceful here, and then there's people on Twitter showing like the protests and the fires being burned down, right? Or and really where this started was Walter Cronkite. He was like one of the most famous like, news broadcasters at the time, and there's something called Cronkite Gate. And what happened is he was into show and he's saying, "This is all there is you need to know." So your 30-minute show gave me the whole world, right? Obviously, is false. But some articles came out and disproved some of the stuff he was talking about, and then all of a sudden people found out it was false. And you see this all the time. Somebody takes a position, but then the knowledge of the crowd jumps in and can quickly start disproving all of that stuff.
Well, we have that almost as more than anyone as Bitcoiners, where we see articles in the New York Times or whoever, and everybody jumps in and corrects them.
Right.
Because they either are misinformed or they are disseminating misinformation.
Yeah. And so the problem is...
disinformation.
And so very similar to the church and the state and the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, a very similar situation has happened today where now we have the power of the crowd. The information moves instantaneously. We have boots on the ground, citizen journalism, if you will, sort of like Elon Musk going to the border and like filming what's going on there when mainstream media won't talk about it. But that's just one of thousands of examples that happen every day. In the book, he talks really about Arab Spring, really where it really started taking off in the 2011, 2012, and how Facebook changed that. And basically, the point of that book is like the center can never hold anymore because the center has a fringe all the way around, not just left or right. The fringe is all the way around, and the center can never hold because they can't hold the narrative. No one can ever hold the narrative. And this is the battle that we're seeing right now, which is why censorship is on the rise. I don't know. You were at that.
Because they lied to us continually. I mean, the forefront of this is Canada.
Yeah.
We just saw that they want to regulate podcasts.
2 new bills they put forward.
Regulate podcasts. Why would they want to regulate a podcast? Because they want to remove something if they don't like it.
Yeah.
Because they want to censor us.
Well, first it's permissions. You have to get a license. Now I have to have permission to even talk.
Yeah, fine, but like that's not the bit that worries me the most. I mean, it's highly concerning, but it's how it will be used.
Well, sure. Well, but if I have to get permission to speak, then they have the power to let me speak or not, right?
But it's the reason that they're doing it is I think they will grant the permissions, but I think the main it's to the platforms. Again, to the platforms, to the Spotify, to the Apples, and whatever.
It's a slippery slope.
Well, no, but you can see the path. They're not, you or I aren't having to get permission. The platforms are going to have to get permission, the Spotify, the Apples. And then what it will be is, if there's a Mark Moss episode criticizing Justin Trudeau, they might be like, Apple, Spotify, you need to take that down. This is what your license says. Yeah. That's the slippery slope.
Well, there's 2 bills, though.
I don't know what the second one is.
There's 2 bills that were put forth. So one is about the platforms. The other one is about actual creators. And right now, it's only if you make $10 million or more. Right, so it doesn't affect the small creators yet, but it's always just the beginning.
So it affects those with the biggest reach.
Right, affects those with the biggest reach, right? So we need to get rid of the Joe Rogans is what we need to do, right?
So it's the Joe Rogan bill.
If you will, right? Because let's just look at some just basic numbers, right? The number 1 CNN show in prime time gets about 300,000 to 500,000 views. I mean, I'm nobody, and I get videos that get more than that sometimes. Joe Rogan's getting 200 million views, right, a month. Let's look at Fox. Basically crushes all of, I don't want to call it mainstream media anymore. It's just legacy media.
Corporate media.
It's not corporate legacy.
That's
right?
what Michael Malice calls it.
Corporate media.
Corporate media. Yeah.
So, but like Fox crushes all that, right? So they had the Republican national debate on, right? They had 13 million views. 13 million. That's a lot. Way more than the other ones. Well, Tucker had Trump on, and he got like 200 million views. I mean, that just shows the sheer size and discrepancy of this data. So,
with that, just to temper it, not that I'm saying Tucker isn't outperforming them, but do we know what makes up that 200 million? If I scroll through and it auto plays, am I one of those? And even if it plays for a few seconds, my assumption is, this in the digital world, people dipping out a bit more than when they actually sit down and watch a debate. So my expectation is, it's like our audio listens versus our YouTube. We retain more audios on Spotify, Apple towards the end than say we do on YouTube. So my assumption is of that 200, it's not just 200 million v 13 million. There's a quality part of that as well. I still think he kicks their ass.
But we don't know of the 13 million either. What's the quality of that? So we could say the same thing, right? And was I in the kitchen? Was my TV playing, but I wasn't really listening? Was it on in the airport, right? So
but we do know, traditionally how these platforms tend to perform and how people dip in and out. Just I know that from working in the world of advertising, the engagements of say TV versus digital. I'm still saying he's kicking their ass, but I don't think it's just a 200 million versus 13 million. I think it's probably lower than 200 million.
Yeah, I don't know so much. Like the Twitter video piece is pretty new, so I'm not super cued in on that. I've been locked out of my Twitter account for 2 months now.
I know you messaged me, and I have to message you.
They keep billing me.
Dude, that was one, by the way, we'll talk about it. That was one hell of a thought through scam.
Yeah. But anyway, I know on my YouTube, I can see the engagement, right? So typically on most of my videos, they're 20, 25 minutes, and I get about a 50 to 60% watch time. On my long form stuff, that goes, an hour plus, it's 30 to 40%. So I can see that, but I don't know what it would be at Fox either, right? So I would agree with you, but it might be the same.
Maybe.
We don't know. Meaning, they both show top line numbers, and maybe at the end of the broadcast, it's similar drop off. I don't know.
The general point you're making is there's this like decentralized content distribution, which is outside the control of the state.
Right. And Canada is one good piece, but Europe is way worse, right? Europe's moving much faster into it. New Zealand, Ireland's already passed a bill now, like it's law where you can face up to 5 years in prison for saying mean things, basically making people feel uncomfortable, and people are already getting brought up on charges. So it's happening all over the world. Of course, the WEF and those people are on their soapbox, really trying to bring this in. Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, the prime minister, has left, and now she's sort of like championing the world to like push more censorship, all in the name of protecting us, obviously, because we don't know what's wrong or right. But this is just an example of technology changing the way that we communicate, and then changing the political and the institutional ideologies of the world, right? So remember, there's 3 ways that technology changes the world. So one, it's changed the way that we organize. So now instead of big manufacturing, and we're all in New York City, now we're working on our laptops all over the world. So we changed the way we organize. 2, again,
well, it's not all of us. We're a small slither of people doing that. The trajectory is that way, but that
the decline of big business. 80, 100 years ago, it was all big corporations with people who work there for 40 years and retire with their pensions.
What I mean is we're not all traveling around the world, though. Like we're
not all traveling around the world, but we have business parks full of little businesses with 10, 20, 30, 40 people in them.
Yeah.
So we're not all traveling the world, to your point, but it does change the way we organize, because now I run a little R&D company with 15 people working for me, or I have a little media company, or I drop ship or outsource products. So it's small business. The shift from big corporate business, mass manufacturing, to small business, if you will. So yes, to your point, not everyone's moving around. However, you do have even big companies like Apple moving their distribution and manufacturing all over the world. So that is also changing that as well, right? So the way it changed, we organize, change the way we communicate, right? So now we have instant communication, boots on the ground, right? Instant feedback. And then it changes the economic system. And so then that's like the third piece. Right. So if we look at how it changes the economic system, then we can see back again, as the world's continued to change, the economic system has continued to change as well. And so when I was in Europe this summer, I know we talked a little bit, I got to spend some time in Florence.
Beautiful place.
Beautiful place.
Oh my God.
I'm not a city person. I'm a beach guy, but it was super fun. I loved it.
I bet your wife loved it.
Yeah, we loved it. All of Italy was awesome.
Yeah.
Because I love history, so it was just great. But yeah, Florence was awesome. But I hired a guy specifically to take me on a financial tour, because Florence is the birthplace of the modern monetary system that we have. And so going into the Renaissance age, the 1500s, we created technology. Money is technology, right? So money is a technology that allows us to communicate value and exchange value. And so that it had a technological leap where we created both the ledger system and double entry accounting. Right? So that was the birthplace of that. So that was a new technology that sped up money, that allowed us to get faster money, because technology had moved forward where we now had manufacturing, we had shipping, things like that. And so then the money took a leap forward as well. And that system sort of held, but it was still like a commodity-based money. So in Florence, they had the florin, which is a gold coin, the longest-lasting gold coin in history that wasn't debased, 400 years. But we were still in this commodity-based money, but they added this technology, the ledger and the double entry accounting, to sort of speed up the velocity of the money. And that system basically held until, maybe the Bank of England was created, sort of like we got this fiat money. But really, probably we can look at it in the early 1900s, back when we had the automobile, mass manufacturing, John Maynard Keynes, and then the creation of the Federal Reserve and the IRS. Now, I would argue that that's an update in technology, but really we stayed on this commodity-based money till probably 1971, because the dollar, we had under the Bretton Woods Agreement, as you've documented many times, the dollar was still backed by gold. And yes, of course, they printed way too many dollars, and so they stole the gold in 1933 to reset it. And they printed too many dollars. They denied France from getting their gold with their warships. So we know that it wasn't a pure gold system, but it sort of was, right? And in 1971, it ended. So then in 1971, we went into a new technology, which is now paper money. Zoltan Pozsar calls it inside money, right? It's like a treasury system, a purely fiat system. And so now for the last 52, 53 years now, we've been in that system, and that's where things are falling apart. So now we bring all this together. So now technology has changed the world, organizing, communicating. It's changed the money system, and now we're seeing this political revolution cycle all happening right now. Kind of brings us to where we are today with the rise of the BRICs. Are we going back to a gold-backed system? Is the US dollar failing? Is it CBDCs? Where does Bitcoin fit in, and all that?
Yeah, but I do want to ask you about AI and where that fits in, because that is a technological revolution that's happening right now in front of our eyes. It's happening fast. Are you using it?
I don't think it's as big of a deal as people make it out to be.
Really?
Yeah. And here's why. So we've been doing language learning models. We've had computer learning for a long time. I don't pretend to be a technologist. Well, I am kind of a technologist, but I'm not like an expert in that. But I have spoken to a lot of experts. My career, I started an internet business in 1999. I started another e-commerce business in 2001 with a big exit. So I've been on the internet for a really long time. My first internet business in 1999, I had to build a server in my office with my own server, 2 servers, hot swappable drives, because there was no cloud computing. So I've been kind of doing this for a long time. I did have the chance to sit down with Naval at Michael Saylor's house and talk to him about it. He's kind of an expert. I've talked to other people that I know that work in this space, designing the programs, specifically around, mostly around in the financial markets. And a lot of it is advanced language learning, which we've had for a long time. So it's really this it's more of like an evolution that's growing. And I think the big debate seems to be around, this event where AI kind of takes over the world, where it starts learning too fast and it starts taking over. Now,
I think that's an entirely different point. I'm talking purely about the effect it will have on business, industry, and jobs.
Yeah, like in which way?
Let's talk about the conversation we had just there. Have you got the little business unit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So at some point in the next 5 years, nobody will be required to go to college and learn a computer programming language. Okay, so this is an example. I don't know if you'll explain this better than me, Danny, but do you want to have a go?
Yeah, so this is a open source AI out of China, I think, called ChatDev, and it's basically like an AI business where you go and you speak to the CEO of the business, give it an idea, and that CEO then goes to its different departments using like multiple different AI tools, where it has like designing, coding, testing, and it'll run through and output the idea that you give it.
Yeah. So already today, the majority of coding is already sort of done by AI. So like it's already pretty much nobody designs code without that assistance already today. So this is a continual graduation into this. But here's why I don't. So this is evolution, but it's not a massive change, and here's why. So the internet is the technology that changed the world, right? And actually, the technological revolution was 1971. It was the microprocessor. The microprocessor is what gave us personal computers, gave us telecommunications, and gave us the internet. So this is a continuation of that. And here's what I mean by that. So what happened is when my parents wanted me to go to college and I wasn't going to do that, my mom said, "You need to be an engineer. That's a really good job. A coder, that should be a really good job." But the internet changed that, and here's why. Those technical jobs, so we have like a creative and an analytical side of our brain. all of our school system has been designed for analytical thinkers. The SAT scores are analytical, et cetera, right? There's another book written, it's called A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. This kind of illustrates this. But what happened is that the internet changed that. And so the internet gave us reach to the whole world now, and it commoditized analytical or technical workers. So what do I mean by that? So my mom wanted me to go be an engineer, but now today we have millions of them in Pakistan and New Delhi and the Philippines, right? So it democratized, it commoditized, which is different, right? Commoditized technical workers. And so for the last 10 years, there's these job boards where you can find these technical workers. There's one called Upwork. I don't know if you guys have used that. I've probably spent $1 million on Upwork in the last decade. I have 5 full-time people that work for me right there. So I've hired coders, I've hired programmers, I've hired UI, UX developers, all of that on there. And so the skill wasn't just, the skill transferred from being the technical worker to now being the creative. Now, where am I going with this? So because this democratized, or I say commoditized access to technical workers, I don't have to write all my content. I hire researchers. I hire writers. I get them for $4 an hour. I hire coders for $4 or $5 an hour. This is only accelerating that. So,
but this is just one example.
I know, but
I think also.
Let me just make this point real quick. So, like ChatGPT, it can write all this content. It can design code. It can do all this research. Yeah, and so can 5 Pakistanis that I just hired on Upwork. Yeah. Now, those are the ones that get marginalized. Right? But it's just a continuation of that, in my opinion.
But that's only one industry and one
Sure, so let's
job.
keep going. What other ones?
But also, rather than it being like $1 million spent over a decade, it can be like $10 spent over a decade and you're getting the same output with 5 less employees.
So what's the point? So when the Industrial Revolution happened and all of a sudden a machine did the work of 5,000 men, so we just marginalized 5,000 men. What's the point? That's what technology always does. Every single time it does that.
But so how does that not have an impact though?
Well, of course it has an impact. So when those 5,000 men lost their job in the fields because now a machine went and harvested the field, what do those 5,000 men do?
Well,
turns out they did medicine and science and technology. That's pretty cool.
But even if it's a massive boon and it allows like loads more creatives to go out into the world and be more productive, that still has a massive impact on like the.
Sure, of course. I'm here telling you that technology is what changes the world. I'm not saying it doesn't have a massive impact.
But what I'm saying is this is a technology that will massively change the world and the way we do things.
Yes.
One person unicorns.
But I don't think it's as big and revolutionary. Like it's not like this cataclysmic thing that's happening. It's like this natural progression that we're continuing to ease into.
I think it's a massive acceleration. I already know businesses I can set up.
It is a massive acceleration. Yes, just like when I could all of a sudden hire 15 Pakistanis to do my code. That was a massive acceleration of my business as well.
Yeah, but that really gradually happened over a period of time. That really came actually with high-speed internet. It wasn't with internet, it was with high-speed internet.
Because then those people had to be educated and they had to kind of come up and learn engineering, and then the job boards had to be created, and then we had to learn how to but
it's the speed of change.
Sure, the speed of change is that rapidly accelerating. Yeah. And I'm bullish on the future. And to your point, I don't want to say like I just don't disagree. Or I don't disagree. I do agree with you. Between what's happening with AI and what's happening with Bitcoin, what's happening with decentralized protocols overall, I see massive change happening in this next 5 to 7 years. Yes.
But the thing about AI is I see it as a massive centralizing force.
Why is that?
Because
whoever programs the AI has all the power?
Yeah, and also you can just, one of the things the internet did do, internet companies, they concentrated pools of capital in that much smaller companies could make massive amounts of money. And I think AI will do that even more so. I think, and you could see, what are the new jobs that are going to be created that all the people who lose their jobs who've been coders or designers or models or, oncologists, like whatever industry you look at where AI can do the job faster, better, cheaper.
It's going to displace a lot of workers.
Yeah, and what's going to happen to those? And
they're going to have to find new jobs.
But that might have to change the way we organize because there might be, I can expect a demand on government to fix this. I can also then see how does it change in terms of money. I could totally see UBI coming in, even though we all probably hate it.
I'm here making the case that technology does change the way we organize and communicate and work. So I agree with you on those points, of course.
I'm just wondering where you see AI in this, but you see it differently from me.
I see it the same way as you. I just don't turn to a state response.
I'm not turning to a state.
And the reason why is because the Luddites. You know the Luddites?
Yeah.
So the Luddites were, they went and set fire to the power looms. So they did tapestry and rugs. And when the power looms came out, they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to take away all our jobs.
That's the Hollywood's
We can't have these things. They went and burned them all down, right? And so every time there's a new piece of technology, the group that becomes creative destruction, the group that gets their jobs destroyed stands up to your point, the Hollywood writers, right?
Because they're fearful of AI taking jobs.
I go down to El Salvador or Nicaragua surfing regularly. In Nicaragua, there's a place that I went back to several years in a row. And every time I go back, they're still working on the same road. And I'm like, what the heck? They're putting like cobblestones in, And I'm like, I asked the guy, I'm like, why don't they just bring a tractor in here and just like do this thing? And he's like, well, what are the people going to do for work? And there's a story. One of the famous economists in the U.S., Milton Friedman, went to China, and they were digging a dam. And he said, "Why don't you bring a tractor in and do this?" And he said, "Well, what are the people going to do for work?" He said, "Well, if we're trying to get the people to work, give them spoons instead." So like we could have that argument, but like throughout history, the buggy manufacturers were against the automobiles. Right, the candle manufacturers were against electricity, and so sure, the Hollywood writers and the coders are against this technology. They'll find something new to do.
Yeah, but don't confuse me. I'm not turning to a state response. I'm saying people will turn to a state response.
Sure. Just like, well, and in the past, they didn't have the state response, so they just had to go learn something new to do.
Yeah.
There's stories of like in Oregon, which was like a famous logging area, that now they're not doing logging. And so there's people in these old logging towns that have no jobs. And they're demanding the state give them welfare. It's like, dude, learn a new skill and move somewhere else.
I do think we are heading towards that, and I don't know when it happens, that singularity point where we do have robots and AI that do so much that there aren't jobs out there to do because like, you can't just invent new industries you can, but you know what I mean.
And then, this is something that, Jeff Booth talks about pretty extensively, right? Where it's like the rate of technological change should be making our lives easier. We should be working less. When I was a kid, there was a cartoon called The Jetsons, and they had the robot cleaning the house. Like, why can't I want that world? So I don't have to work as much, right? So we should have robots that do our work so we work less hours. That's the whole point.
Of course, but where does our money come from?
But because we're in an inflationary monetary system, it's the money is taking away the deflationary effects of technology and it's creating this inflationary environment. So this is like this cataclysmic event that's really shaping up right now.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
So that's something Jeff Booth has talked about extensively, right?
Of course. I personally think you're underestimating the impact this is going to have.
I'm not underestimating it. It's massive. I just think throughout history we've always seen the same thing, and people just learn new skills. Like there's if you go to any of these national parks, you'll see signs like "Don't feed the animals."
Yeah.
Right. And they say don't feed the animals because the animals become dependent, and then they don't know how to go hunt. Right. So if you have a lion born in captivity, in like 5 years after it's been raised in captivity, you go let it go in the jungle, like it's going to die, right? But we're not animals. We're not animals. We can learn new skills. History has shown that thousands of years over every single time. Now, does it come without turbulence? And of course not. Of course, it's a disruptive movement, 100%. But I'm super bullish on humanity. I'm super bullish on entrepreneurialism. I'm super bullish on human ingenuity. My friend Robert Kiyosaki was writing a new book. He shelved it temporarily, but it's called The Infinite Return. And it's all about, because our human capacity, our ingenuity is so big that we have an infinite return. We can solve these problems. We can continue on. So I don't see it as a cataclysmic event, and nor do I really see it as a point where this Terminator world where machines are smarter than people and it puts us all into bondage and creates a World War III. I don't see that either.
Non-zero?
Well, nothing's non-zero for sure. I think it has a low probability. Part of the conversation I had with Naval is he said, so there's two types of AI really. I mean, there's way more, but if you want to broadly categorize it, narrow and broad, right? Not narrow in general. The narrow AI has had massive progress. This is everything that we're seeing right now. They're beating chess players, driving cars, right? So I program it for a very narrow set of circumstances. We've had massive progress there. General AI, according to him, in the conversation I had, hasn't advanced since 1970. Like we're nowhere near. Like the power of one brain cell has so much power, we don't even know what that is. And like the ability to get a machine to think better than a human with creativity, we haven't really gotten closer to that. And I don't think it's possible. And part of the reason why I don't think it's possible is because of my worldview. And my worldview shapes a lot of things. And so we'll just get this out of the way. I believe that we were made by a creator. And I don't believe that machines will ever be able to replace that. And so that worldview shapes a lot of things. Like, for example, it's part of the reason why I'm not a statist. See, statists don't believe in a higher power, which then there's
That's just not true. How can you say statists don't believe in a higher power? Because half the apparatus of the U.S. government is Christian conservatives.
I'm making a stereotypical thing, but a lot of people think that the government needs to continue to increase laws and regulations because they're trying to legislate morality. So I believe it's not what's in a man's heart, it's what's in a man's hand. If I want to kill you, I'll drive a car, I'll use gasoline, I'll get a gun, whatever I have. There's no in the UK you have knife stabbings, right? And so like you can't legislate morality. The problem is that freedom is a very messy situation because with great freedom comes great responsibility. And when you take the morality piece out, there's two things happen. So one, how do we create enough laws to make people good? There's not a way. And two, throughout history, and even in from my own world, I don't want to throw out numbers, but I give a pretty good amount of my wealth away every year. I support missions, I do these things, and a lot of people don't. Like I was on a plane in first class with somebody, a pretty well-off person, and he was saying, "But if the state doesn't take care of these underrepresented people, who will?" I'm like, "Well, I will. The church will." I'm like, let me ask you just a question, a personal question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I asked him, how much of your wealth do you give away? And he said, none. I'm like, well, that's your worldview, right? So,
but I give a lot away.
A lot. I'm talking categorically, right? And so like, if you think that people need all these regulations and laws to make them good and moral, well, typically we've got morality from some form of Christianity. Like I'm not a Mormon, but I recognize that because they live by a pretty strict code, like they're pretty good people for the most part. Like the Bible has the 10 commandments. Even if you don't believe in God, I think it's pretty obvious that if we lived by those 10 commandments, the world would probably be a better place, right? Don't kill, don't steal, like don't cheat with your neighbor's wife. Like those are like pretty good things. So anyway,
isn't not cheating with your neighbor's wife morality?
What's that?
Morality.
What about it?
You said you can't legislate morality.
Right.
Because what that bad for me, sorry. So what can the state legislate that or what does the state legislate that
okay. So we already talked about this. So like let's talk censorship. So
no, that's fine.
In Ireland, if you say mean things, you call someone something that upsets them, then we're gonna pass a law against that. Like that's legislative morality.
Okay. All right. Okay. I still think you're wrong on statist atheist. I think that's like I think that's just factually untrue.
Okay, so if you have no view of a deity, God, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
So you don't believe that you have.
I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist.
Okay. So then why? So then you have no moral code to live up to.
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's just inbuilt in me.
Where did that come from?
I think.
Why would you respect human life and why would you respect human property? And why wouldn't you just go kill people and drive on the wrong side of the road?
Because I have free thought and I have the ability to choose. And, there's a combination of how I was raised by my parents.
You do think that if the state doesn't take care of these underrepresented people, who will? That's some of the things that we've talked about in previous conversations.
But not to the level you probably think. Like, I am not opposed to taxation and redistribution for helping the most desperate people in society. I'm not opposed to that. I do think the state is way too big. Like, if anything, I'm massively drawn towards like minarchism. Yeah. And I similar to I've never voted Labour in the UK, which is essentially our Democrat Party. I've only ever voted Conservative. Once I voted for the Green Party when I was young, and then I voted for a duck when I was pissed off.
I would say,
but bear with me. What I've always said is that I'm happy for some of my taxation to go towards helping others, and I've been okay with that. But I think the state is way, way too big. Yeah. I actually prefer redistributing it myself, and I do a good job of that. But I have a moral compass without religion.
Well, that moral compass came from you growing up in England, which was a Christian nation. So there's probably some of that's rubbed off. And again, as we started out the whole conversation,
sorry to push back. No, I disagree. I think humans can have a moral compass without religion. I think we can know between right and wrong.
Well, so first of all, there's
I think it comes as well, because I'm also atheist, and I don't believe that I need like top down someone telling me what is right and wrong, because it's how you interact with people. It's how it makes you feel to interact with people. Like there's lots to it.
So first of all, we started this conversation saying that there's a spectrum. So none of this is black or white. And the other thing I would say is there's religion, and then there's like beliefs and moral compass, right? So like religion to me means like acts of work. So for example, a lot of religions require me to do certain things every single day if I'm going to earn my way into heaven or whatever that may be. So that's like religion. And then there's just like belief as well, right? I think, but again, saying that this is like a spectrum of things. And so obviously you guys can be different. There's a whole spectrum there.
I think there's plenty of people who are religious with a moral compass who have committed evil acts. I mean,
of course there is. There's a spectrum. So it's not a black or white issue. So I'm just saying that your worldview is going to shape your decisions.
Yeah, but I don't.
Would you agree with that?
I don't. Yeah, but I don't.
Would you agree that your worldview shapes your decisions and the way you interact? Right. So you guys believe in human life, and you believe in treating others with respect. So that shapes your decisions.
Yeah.
Some people don't.
Yeah.
Some people are very mean.
Yeah.
Right.
But what's religion got to do with that?
Well, I believe if you believe in a higher power that gives you a code to live by, then you would respect that code.
But that's just, you can factually prove that's untrue. The amount of people who claim to be religious who've started wars, the number of priests who fuck kids. Come on, man. Like there's plenty of people who are religious who have a terrible moral code.
Again, so that's religious. I'm not talking about religious. I'm not talking about religion, right? So
Christians.
Those are big, broad terms. That's like saying capitalism, right? That's like saying like capitalists are like whatever, right? So like that's a big term. So I would say, okay, so let's have a religion conversation.
Yeah, I think it's an important point.
So I don't like the word religious.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that I'm religious at all.
Okay.
I say that I follow the teachings of Jesus. And Jesus said that the greatest commandment, he was trapped by the Pharisees, and they tried to trap him. They said, what is the greatest commandment? He said, love God and love other people more than you love yourself. That's the greatest commandment.
So you love me more than you love you.
You're
stumbling.
I mean, that's the goal. I mean, I'm not perfect, and nobody's perfect, and that's the other thing.
So you don't.
The other thing, well, I try to treat everybody with love and respect.
Yeah, no, I'm joking with you.
Right? I mean, I try to. I mean, that's why we can have a good conversation, right? Nobody's perfect. Like, I'm not Jesus, but that's the goal to try to live up to. So like, I think if the whole world, and really like I was at this Pink concert a couple years ago with my kids, and she's up on stage and she's like, the world needs more love, and we all need love and acceptance. And, she had all her, gay and trans and whatever up there. And that's what they were kind of talking about. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what Jesus said. The number one commandment is to love other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm okay with that, though.
Yeah.
But I do love other people without religion.
Well, again, I'm not talking about religion.
Without the teachings of Jesus.
Because in Jesus' teaching, he said that you cannot earn it. There's nothing you can do to earn it. So it's not, there's no works. There's no religion. There's no things that you can do to earn it, right? And so that's why I want to differentiate from religion. And I don't want to pull other religions out, but most of them all have a set of things. I have to go every week, and I have to do confession, and I have to pray the rosary, or I have to get down on my knees every day at noon, and I have to whatever, right?
Set of rules.
So a set of rules. But this isn't a set of rules. It's just like I just need to love other people more than I love myself. And I think if the world lived by that, it would be pretty good.
I mean, I can agree that if the world lived with more love, it'd be a better place.
Yeah.
I think right now that's a poignant thing to say, but I've forgotten what the original point is you're making. But I
was just saying like this worldview. So I was saying back to AI, because of where we're at with technology and just the worldview that I have, I don't think that AI gets smarter than humans and puts us all into slavery.
Oh, yeah, because you think because of God, AI can't get smarter than humans. That was what you said.
Yeah, I believe that our creativity is given to us by God, and we can't put that into machines.
I mean, I love the creativity of humans, but God didn't give us the ability to fly, so we invented airplanes.
Sure, but that's not the same. That's not what I'm talking about. So God gave us the creativity, and he gave us the ability to come up with these ideas, but I don't think that we can create life. So for example, even if you're like a evolutionist, for example, okay, so chase it however far back we want to go. So we came from an amoeba. Cool.
Yeah.
Where did life come from, though?
I mean, I'm not a scientist.
Exactly. So, okay, so we came from a monkey. The monkey came from this. We came from, like, where did life come from? So at some point.
So did God create the amoeba?
Well, I don't believe we came from an evil, but even if you do, at some point there was life, right? And so like there's now like, oh, we're going to be cloning humans and things like that. But like, I don't believe we can create life. Like, sure, I guess we could probably create an organ, right? Or we could maybe like graft skin, like we can do those things, but not life.
We could clone humans. It would be technically possible to clone humans. I don't think it would be advisable.
There are people cloning humans now, but it's not in the way that I think most people think about it, where like, sure, they're getting embryos and eggs and then they're putting them in wombs and doing things like that, but that's still like life, right? Yeah. So humans aren't creating life itself.
Yeah, okay. But haven't they created an artificial embryo now? I'm pretty sure.
Don't know.
I think they might have. But like, I see what you're saying. So you don't think AI can ever be outperform humans because you think God's created the brain and we can't create something better than the brain. I believe he's given us the skills to create anything we want. And if we can create something...
You don't believe that because you said you're an atheist.
No, sorry. Even if I did believe God created that, I still think we have these brains and this ability to create technology that can outperform our brain. I do think that will be possible.
Well, and we certainly already have, right? We've already created computers that can certainly outcompute our human brain. So we certainly have.
But it's
the creativity piece that I have a problem with, right? But
when you say creativity, what do you mean? Artistic creativity?
Yeah. So like back to sort of, as I said, sort of like commoditizing technical workers. And so now the skill isn't being the smartest technical worker. Now it's me seeing a problem, coming up with a creative solution, organizing the people that I need to go solve that problem, right? So that's creativity. So if I'm a conductor of an orchestra, I can't play better violin than Danny or the better trombone than you, but I can get you guys together and help you create a song. And so the creativity to see a problem, solve a problem, organize the people, and that would be creativity.
But AI can create songs and music.
Peter,
I'm just saying, like
right, but those are very narrow technical things, right? So, like, hey, can you analyze all these beats and rhythms and then come up with something new that fits this? Of course, I can. I've listened to it; it's great, it's amazing.
But isn't essentially what our brain has done? Our brain is like, if I was a rapper, I've grown up listening to rap music, and all I've done is I've learnt the beats that I think work, and the way rapping should work, and the way lyrics should work, and I've come up with I've come up with my rap. Like, isn't that essentially what an AI is doing? It's doing exactly the same. It's doing it in a programmatic way, which is a digital, a digital version of ours is organic. But in
a very narrow path, right? So first of all, let me just, I'm happy to continue having this conversation.
I love these rabbit holes. That's why I
came here to talk about the monetary system changing and going into CBDCs, which I've studied extensively. I'm not an AI expert. So I'm happy to sit here and talk with you.
No, but I love these rabbit holes.
I'm not an AI expert and I haven't spent a lot of time going here. So this is like, in the world, like I try to know enough about what I need to know, but not any more than I need to. And so this isn't like an area of expertise for me. So like I said, I'm happy to have this conversation because it's fun.
Yeah.
But I'm just not a subject matter expert. So
I mean, look,
take it for what it's worth,
The point of difference that we've realized is that we have two worldviews. Yours has the writings of Jesus embedded in it. Mine has atheism embedded in it. Yeah, I think we both have a very similar moral compass. We've both come to a very similar moral compass.
And I've seen the stuff that you're doing, and I would honestly believe that you care about other people, and I've seen what you've done in other countries, and I know you're giving your money to help others, and so I see it, and I believe that you do those things. But again, it's not black or white, right? And there's a whole bunch of people here, and so like you're certainly not the rule for most people. You're probably more of a anecdotal type of figure, right?
Yeah, but I travel a lot and I see good people everywhere, and I do not see a correlation with the teachings of Jesus or not the teachings of Jesus.
Well, maybe you just don't understand how far that's really kind of made its way through culture.
I actually think humans are on the whole mainly good.
They are. I would agree with you on that. And there's been actually numerous tests that have been done that prove that, which is then going back to the censorship laws and these things. We don't need all this. People are mostly good. And we talk about KYC laws and AML laws, and it's like for the 1 or 2% of people that may do something bad, why would we penalize the 99% of people?
Well, I think technology has centralized evil and it's promoted evil.
Well, it's lowered the cost of violence for sure, right? So in that regard, it has.
Danny's always a good flag here.
Stay on this topic or move on?
Yeah.
Move on, I think.
Yeah.
We've done it.
Like I said, I'm not an expert in AI, so like it's fun just to talk about, but you'd probably be better off talking to somebody with a little bit more in the weeds in it than I was. But sort of going back to this technology changing the world, and then it changed the way that we organize, which then changes political structures and so forth. Like now, and we kind of now going back to it a little bit, we talked about how it changed the financial system that we have. And so about 80 years ago, we kind of got this global monetary system. And then about 50 years ago, we went to this like paper money system, but we can see that's breaking apart. And I'll just revert people back to your interviews with Luke Grauman and Lynn Alden if they want to get into the weeds of how that system's breaking apart. Preston Pysh talks about how the treasury markets, the global bond markets are starting to break apart, which is causing this. Luke Grauman's talked extensively about the conundrum that we're in right now, and even Lynn Alden, where like even now more deficit spending leads to more inflation. Like we're sort of in this doom loop at this point, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I don't want to go deep into that. I know James Lavish, and I'm happy to do that if you want to.
No, we covered that with James Lavish 2 days ago. But really, we're at this point where there's like a fork in the road, and is it the CBDC that extends this and also brings together all these other screwed up technologies that centralizes power, or is it Bitcoin?
Right. So I think there's an interim step, right? Okay. And so in August we had the meeting of the BRICs nations that got together, and that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. In that BRICS nation meeting or summit in August that happened, they introduced a bunch of new countries that are going to join the BRICs, including Saudi Arabia, which controls the petrodollar, which has kind of sort of kept the dollar in its position of power. Argentina, Iran, another oil producing nation, and so it was a pretty big deal. Now, a lot of people leading into that event said that there was going to be like this new gold-backed currency that was going to be announced. Before the event happened, they said, no, we're not going to announce that, and they didn't. So a lot of people were like, oh, that was sort of like a big nothing burger. But I think it was sort of like a nothing burger in the short term, but I think it's a very big deal in the longer term, and I think this has a big piece to play.
Who was it who said to us, is it Doomberg, who said he doesn't think BRICS will happen as a currency? Yeah. So his response to that is the problem you've got with all these nations is they can't trust each other.
Sure, I agree. Yeah,
and most likely in the end, the dollar will survive as a global reserve currency.
So yes and no, right? So I agree 100%. So that's part of the thesis that trust, and I started out with that earlier. Trust is gone. Yeah. So when the U.S., when they defaulted on their gold payments, when they took the gold in 1933, when they defaulted on gold payments 71, when they took Russia's took Russia's FX reserves, like trust is gone, right? But to your point and Doomberg's point, yes, I think there's no trust in the BRICS nations either. I mean, the second largest nation in BRICS, the R, Russia, Putin couldn't even go to the BRICS summit, or they were going to arrest him. Like, how is that going to work? Like, it's not, right? So I think you have to kind of, and then you have the dollar bulls. You got the Brent Johnsons or Nick Bhatia. He talks about the death of the dollar is greatly over exaggerated. And the reason why they state that is because there's no replacement for the dollar. There's no deep global bond markets. There's no SWIFT payment systems. There's no correspondent banks. And so I agree on that. There's not. And so you can't just, as Nick Bhatia would say, you can't just snap the dollar out and then plug in a yuan or yen or whatever it is. And he's absolutely right. But what happens with technology, going back to technology, is that technology leapfrogs. So the US had wired phones, and we got wired internet very quickly. Africa never got wired phones. They just jumped right to wireless. And so that is this piece. So there's two things going on. One, we're de-evolving and trying to go back to gold. Okay, so, and then we'll talk about the re-evolution. But the de-evolution is sort of going back to a gold-based or really a commodity-based money. So right now we have OPEC Plus saying, hey, we're going to lower oil production. China has just gone around over the last several years and bought 50% of all the lithium mines in the world. So now GM spent $650 million on a lithium mine. They would rather have the commodity in the ground than the dollars of the treasuries. OPEC says, why would I continue to pump out oil to hold treasuries that are losing value? I'd rather keep the oil. So we're seeing this shift back to commodities, and gold is a commodity as well. And so we have reserve currencies. The currency is used for transactions, and then we have reserve assets, which is where do I store my wealth? And so really what they're saying is, so in the BRICS nations, in the BRICS summit, they urged each member nation to trade in their own currencies. So we're already starting to see that happening, right? We're starting to see oil being done in yuan and Indian rupees and things like that. So they're encouraging everyone to start trading in their own currencies. But where do they store it? Well, they're still storing it in dollars, except for over the last 10 years, actually net treasuries have gone down while gold has gone up. And so they're going back to gold as a reserve asset for right now.
Are they not actually? Is it more they're building a basket? It's like...
Well, they're building a basket. So as I said, they're buying lithium in the ground. They're keeping the oil in the ground. But with their reserve balance, they're putting that into gold.
Yeah, I feel like they're almost doing what we're doing in that I don't trust the pound. I don't hold pound. I have one little storage of physical pounds for an emergency, just in case it's lost 10% of the last year.
Yeah.
But I have that just for an emergency fund, right? I don't hold pounds. So what do I do? If I've got pounds, excess pounds, I buy Bitcoin or I buy companies or I put it into property.
Right.
That's my
Right.
way of avoiding holding pounds.
Right.
And so they're doing the same for a different reason, for two reasons. I think
They don't want to hold treasuries.
They don't want to hold treasuries.
Because either one, they're losing value to commodities, or two, they could get seized.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this is like this interim step.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now we're in this like limbo, like what are we going to do? We don't trust the dollars. Even if we do trust that they're not going to seize our accounts like they did with Russia, they're losing value faster than the commodities are.
Yeah.
Oil is going higher. We can see Japan's being forced to sell treasuries to buy energy. Mm-hmm. So what do? I'd rather keep the commodities. One, I don't want to be seized. Two, I don't want to lose value. But because one, gold failed because it's old technology, the final settlement's too slow, too expensive to send gold around the world. There's no trust. How do I know Danny has the gold and he's going to pay me? What if he sends me gold, but it's fraudulent? Like China got caught with gold painted bars, right? Like, so there's no trust there. And it's old technology. It's too slow, too clunky. So we're kind of stuck in this like interim, but there's a leapfrog coming. Okay, so as Nick Badia would say, you can't just snap the dollar out and plug the yuan in. You can't, but there's a leapfrog moment. And this leapfrog is a project that the BIS is working on called Project mBridge. And so Project mBridge is basically a CBDC hub that would allow each nation to have their central bank digital currency, and then it would be a central bank hub that would then swap those currencies for each other. Okay, so they don't need the correspondent banks. They don't need the SWIFT system. Mm-hmm. They don't need the wired telephones to now have the wireless money, right? And so we have China, Hong Kong. So the importance of having Hong Kong in this is that Hong Kong is the financial hub for the world, but it's really China's gateway to the financial system. You got the UAE, the energy hub, right? And you got Thailand, which is now sort of like this manufacturing hub in the world. A lot of manufacturing has started to move out of China because it's already gotten pretty expensive, so it's moved to the rest of Asia. So these are key countries that are in this right now. And so now
it's got a shitcoin in it.
What, the token?
Yeah.
Yeah. So each nation would basically have their own token, and then at the central bank or the BIS, they would swap this out.
The traditional global payment system is closely monitored by the US and European authorities. It relies on the dollar and the correspondent banks to act as intermediaries. mBridge would be a faster alternative. SWIFT and USD are not involved in the mBridge exchange process. Critics worry this could affect sanction enforcement. Of course.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
None of these nations want to be sanctioned.
Yeah.
I think if you go the other way, Danny.
Oh, yeah.
Like right there. So now we can see the trade among mBridge partners totaled $563 billion. That's not a lot, but it's not nothing.
It's the Bitcoin network.
It's $500 billion.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can see where that's happening, right? So, and this is for the BIS if you keep going. So that's not nothing.
I want to know what this token is though.
Yeah, it's just it's like a SDR token, if you will, right? Although something interesting is if we go back to monetary history, the IMF, which creates the SDR baskets of currencies, the IMF was created during the Bretton Woods Agreement. So the IMF is sort of like a G7 controlled entity, which you've talked to like Alex Gladstein, talks about how the IMF uses this for appropriations to these small countries. The IMF is not involved in this. And the IMF had a oh crap moment about a month ago, and they came out and said, oh crap, this has gotten way too advanced, it's gotten way too far ahead of us. We don't have any foresight or regulation. They could use this for sanctions. We need to get involved.
Okay.
But they don't want them to get involved. I think there's one more chart if you scroll up. So you kind of see like how this works right here. So a very similar situation that the internet works the same, but it just doesn't need the wired telephone system.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now we're in this interim, like, well, let's just hold the commodity. Let's keep the oil in the ground. We'll buy the lithium mines. We'll buy some gold. We're reducing our exposure to U.S. treasuries. But we don't really trust each other. The gold's a problem. So what we need is instant settlement. Back to technology, and I think you probably talked about this, Lynn Alden. We've gone into a world where we have instant transactions, but we don't have instant settlement. Right? So if I'm going to settle with you in gold, how's that going to work? Give me the drugs. No, give me the money, But now we can have instant settlement happening right here. So I think this is the goal that they're going to. I mean, $500 billion in 2021 is no small number. There's other reasons why this is what they want if we want to get into more of the control aspects of the world, obviously. So China with the social credit score system, this is like the ultimate piece to snap in. So control your movement. 15-minute cities, health passports, things like that, EVs, whatever. But then really control your money, because at the end of the day, without the freedom to transact, there's no freedom.
Yep.
Right. It all comes down to the freedom to transact. And so CBDCs give them that ability. As Henry Kissinger said, control the money, control the world. And so they want to do that.
Is that essentially a multi-country CBDC?
Well, each country, because remember, they are urging each nation to trade in their own currency. So it's sort of like an IMF SDR basket, which is what was really originally invented. So each nation would have their own central bank digital currency, and then they would use the inbridge per the BIS to do all this global trade and settlement for them. So you still have the trusted third party.
Okay, but if Thailand is trading and buying from Thailand's buying and trading with Hong Kong, what are they sending them? Are they send?
So Thailand. So think of it. Let's think of it a little
Thai
more.
baht, isn't it?
Let's think about it a little more. Yeah, their currency, right?
Yeah, but does that mean Hong Kong then holds the Thai baht?
Or they exchange it for something else, right? So like, let's say, for example, we have to understand that nobody wants money. We want the things that money buys us. So what we really want is goods and services. Here in the United States, we have like Chuck E. Cheese, where you go get video games with your kids, right? So I take my kid to Chuck E. Cheese. My kid wants to play a game, but I can't spend my dollars. In order to play, I have to go get the Chuck E. Cheese tokens. So I'll buy the Chuck E. Cheese tokens for only what I want to interact with Chuck E. Cheese for, right? So what do I want the Indian rupee for? Well, the rupee, no one in the world wants the rupee, so I could only spend it at India. What do I want the Chinese yuan for? Well, I could only spend it for what I would buy from China, right? So each currency sort of has the value for what the countries export. And if you look at it from that perspective, what does the U.S. export? Financial services and social media services. Putin actually called us out and he said, "What are you going to do? Eat your social media stocks?" Right? We're not producing anything. The exports of goods that the U.S. sends out, our top 3 exports of physical stuff, not services, is energy. But the U.S. is trying to get rid of its energy as fast as it can. And with the high rates that we have, the entire Permian Basin is rolling over. So like, not only is the Biden administration trying to shut off the permits, the high interest rates that we have is shutting it all down anyway. So the only thing the world needs from us is energy, and we're trying to get rid of it as fast as we can. So what do they need dollars for? So I think this is a pretty big deal. The reason why it ultimately fails is because it's still fiat currency.
Yes.
And so it doesn't solve any of these debt problems that they have. And so they don't really understand this. I think it was Balaji said that, I thought it was a pretty unique twist, but like a central bank digital currency was actually created as a counter-revolution to Bitcoin. And so if you look at like some of the statements out of the BIS and the ECB, et cetera, like Christine Lagarde, they think the people are demanding that what we really want is digital money. That's what we really want. And so they need to give it to us. If the state doesn't give us digital money, then we're going to go create it on our own. And so the BIS's statements are like, we need to give them a central bank digital currency that they can trust, because without central banks, there's no trust. But they have this all wrong. So all we have to do is look at probably the best experiment in the world right now is in Nigeria. And they created that e-Naira.
And it failed.
And it failed spectacularly, but you have to look at why it failed, I think is the important piece, right? So Nigeria has massive amounts of inflation, like crazy inflation. And so the people started using Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, I think it's like the 11th most place used in the world. 80% of all Bitcoin transactions under $1,000 happen there. And so the people are like, well, the government's like, well, what they want is digital money. So let's give them this e-Naira. But the people rejected it, right? And so then they tried the carrot. First, it's always a carrot and then a stick. So the carrot was like, hey, well, we'll give you discounts on your pedicabs. We'll give you discounts on these things if you use it. And the people still wouldn't use it. So then came the stick. And the stick was, we're just going to remove all the cash out of circulation. So they removed the cash, and then the entire economy crashed. And then the people are like, why would we use the e-Naira when it's the exact same thing as the regular Naira? Meaning it's still losing value, you're still printing endless amounts. And they finally had to just cancel the whole thing after they tried multiple experiments of removing cash, crashed the entire economy.
So were they just done with it?
They're done with it. They had a revolution. Their entire government got washed out. They had to bring in an entire new political party.
All based on this project.
All based on this
Love
project.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
And in Canada, which they're wishy-washy going both ways. We just talked about 2 bills they're putting in on censorship, but the Central Bank of Canada put out a report, I think 2 months ago, saying that as of now, the central bank digital currency is sort of like on hold. We don't know why we need it, and it looks like the people don't want it.
Yeah, and I also think the US will struggle because I think there'll be massive rejection from Republican states.
Right.
Certainly.
Well, there already is.
So it's banned in Florida, right?
Yeah,
they've legislated
multiple states. Multiple states, and in addition, the U.S. doesn't really need it because what the U.S. has done has the stable coins, and so now the U.S. dollar stable coins are just taking off all around the world.
Yeah, but there's a different reason to want it. It's not that you have the digital stablecoins; it's that you want the control that comes with it.
There's that.
Yeah.
So there's certainly that. So that's more of a conspiratorial theory kind of viewpoint.
Is it though?
Well, I mean, I agree with that, but for some people they may not see that. But what we've seen in the U.S. is like because the stablecoins have grown so big, now the stablecoins are buying U.S. treasuries.
I know, it's mad, isn't it?
Well, who's going to buy U.S. treasuries? So now Argentina can now get out of the peso and buy the dollar in a stablecoin, and then the stablecoin turns around to buy its treasury.
And under Javier Milei, they might even dollarize as a nation.
They might even dollarize as a nation, which Argentina is supposedly joining the BRICs. And this is why the BRICs is doomed to fail. So this is sort of what I'm talking about, the de-evolution. So we're devolving, getting away from a global homogeny. If you scroll up, Danny, there was a couple other charts I wanted to show. Just scroll up to the top. And so this chart right here is interesting. So this is globalization over 5 centuries. So this is trade, globalization as far as each nation working with each other. And what you can see is that it really barely moved above 10% until technology happened in the 1800s, which allowed the world to start really trading with each other. And then you can see it took off into World War I. So the high point was when World War I happened. And obviously when the whole world goes into war, we don't trade. So then it started crashing from World War I into World War II. After World War II was over, it took off again. From the peak at World War I until it got back up to its previous all-time high was a 60-year period. And that's where we're going into right now, right? The world does no longer trust each other. The world is no longer globally trading. President Xi at the BRICS summit said, he wants the BRICS nations to rise up and challenge the G7, not cooperate, not work together, not trade with, challenge the G7, right? And now we have these trade wars. The U.S. cut them off of microchips. Now China banned gallium and uranium exports, which we need for our EV world. So we're entering this period where global trade is plunging at a rapid rate. And we're going to have this like 60-year period potentially of global trade or deglobalization, decentralization happening. They're de-evolving, going back to some quasi-commodity gold money, which we know will ultimately fail. There's no trust at all. So how do we trust each other? And once trust is gone, it doesn't come back, probably not for a few generations. So how does the world move forward?
Well, it needs to... Let me give you an analogy.
Oh, I wanted to show you these charts. So this is after World War II was over. Remember I showed we started climbing back up. And you can see the trading partners of the world. And it's very U.S.-centric right there. Yeah. Okay, that's 60. Now scroll up to 1990 right there. And look how much it's changed now over here with Europe really jumping in pretty heavy right here after World War II is over. And then look at 2020 now.
That's insane.
So the technology has changed the way that we organize. It's changed the way that we communicate. So now we can work with people all over the world. We've moved into smaller countries all over the world, manufacturing processes all over the world. And now it's changing our money. We're trying, the political system and everything is being changed because of this. We're de-evolving, going back to this commodity-based money, which is never going to work because it's slow for settlement and it's all technology and we don't trust each other. And so the only way we can start to re-evolve again is going to a sort of like a...
censorship resistant, trustless money.
And censorship, yes, but really more a decentralized ledger that nobody can control.
Well, so let me give you let me tell you what happened in Lebanon, which is a great example of this. they've killed the economy, they've destroyed the currency, they've stolen everyone's money, and this shadow economy, there's no effective government, the shadow economy is built up, which is a cash dollar economy, where people have just said, fuck this, I need to build a business, I need to grow a business. And so it operates outside the apparatus of the government. So it's kind of censorship resistant, and it's kind of with a bearer instrument because it's a cash dollar economy. Right. I can trade with you and there's no one in there interfering. There's no digital transaction. And so it shows me that people do want to trade and they do want to build the businesses. They just need government to get the fuck out of the way.
Right.
Obviously, I'm in my mind, that's great, but that is centralized around Beirut. That doesn't solve international transfers because they can't do international trade because it's a cash dollar economy. I mean, they will have ways. But you and I know, like, if I needed a service off you, there's a high chance I pay you in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And so...
And in other nations, they're trading water for batteries.
Yeah. So we've got this kind of like CBDC versus Bitcoin war for that next technological, monetary, political evolution.
Right. And the CBDCs will fail because they're still fiat currency. It doesn't solve any of the underlying macroeconomic global debt problems that we have.
Yeah, all it does is extend control.
All it does is it allows more velocity and money so they can get more fiscal, monetary base out to the people so they can get inflation back up. Yeah. But it doesn't help the debt situation that we're in. It certainly doesn't help productivity, and it certainly doesn't help global trade. So that's why it's doomed to fail. So we're sort of going into this de-evolution. They think the answer is digital money. That's what the people want. That's why they created Bitcoin, right? Without really understanding what it is. And then it will be the final piece of technology that's going to disrupt this entire system that we have. It just seems so inevitable. I just don't see how the world could move forward without something like this in a world where trust is lost.
No, it's like you're like standing in front of a river trying to stop it flow.
Yeah,
and you start to see it the more you go through presentations like you've done here, but you also see parts of the world and you see what's happening. I mean, I see it. I just don't understand why everyone else doesn't see it.
Yeah,
and I think that's the biggest challenge we have as a community of people who understand and promote Bitcoin is how do we communicate to the people who've heard of it but are resistant? That's what I struggle with.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Well, so a couple things I'd say about that. So one, a presentation.
We clone Mark Moss's.
a couple things I'd say is one, it just takes time.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I told you I built my own servers in 1999, and then 2001 I started my internet business. There was nobody running around saying we have to orange pill people on the internet.
Yeah.
No one was saying we need full adoption of the internet. Like it just happens, but it happens over a long period of time. Now, this other presentation I give, I was talking about how it's going to be a 40 to 50 year process. People don't want to hear this, but the internet is built off of a protocol called TCP/IP.
Yeah.
That was created in the 80s, 83. 73, DARPA adopted it. 73 was invented. 83, they adopted it as their protocol for the internet. By 93, we had the first internet transaction happen for a Pizza Hut. Actually, it was 94. By the year 2000, so now we are 70, 80, 90, almost 35, 40 years later, by the year 2000, less than 10% of people had ever bought anything online. 2007, the iPhone came out, and boom, yeah. Right? So we're looking like 40, 50 years. Now, let's go back to the monetary system. You said you're still using pounds. Okay, so the pound sterling, a little bit. You said
that's a currency.
That's a currency, right, 10%, right, I know. But let's just think about that. So the pound sterling was the reserve currency of the world. The UK was the superpower of the world. The dollar took over that position. Over that time frame, that was about a 40-year time frame that happened, and the pound is still the third most used currency in the world today. What do you even make and export? Whatever, right? But my point is
I had no answer.
Yeah,
I was trying to think of something. Yeah,
what?
Baked beans.
Baked beans.
Yeah.
But the point is like this is like a 40 to 50 year process, and it's happening. We're witnessing it, and it seems like if you're paying attention, it's happening very fast, right? We now have 4 nations mining Bitcoin. Right? I mean, this is like, it seems like it's happening fast if you're paying attention, but most people are like, we need it to happen faster. We're about, 10, 12 years in at this point. Give it, 20, 30 more years. Now, it's not like you have to wait for that time frame and then it just happens. It's a gradual progression.
Wow.
It's Eric.
Eric Kaysen at the
There
door.
He is.
Are we done?
I mean, I think that's probably a pretty good place to break.
Mate, you're the easiest person to do interviews with. They could go on for literally hours and fucking hours.
That's why I like hanging out with you. We can talk for longer.
Well, we'll do another one soon.
Unscripted.
Maybe in Bedford.
Yeah, maybe.
Mark Moss, where do you want people to go?
Yeah, well, I'd like to say follow me on Twitter, except for I've been locked on my Twitter account for a couple months. So much for a KYC blue check. So go to my website, onemarkmoss.com. You'll find all my other social handles. And follow me on YouTube, Mark Moss.
Mark, I appreciate you so much. I absolutely love these. I don't want to wait a year for another one. We'll find some time soon.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Thank you so much.